notes in Anthony's deck is that he does have War Leader's Helix, which is a particularly powerful spell in this format. A Weapon Surge, which is great in aggressive deck, especially if you can, overload it in mid-combat and get a 2-for-1 out of it. But it's just a great combat trick in general. A decent amount of mana fixing. But yeah.
It looks like as far as the mana fixing goes in Eric's deck, he has a lot of red fixers, but he has opted not to play red. He has Gruul Cluestone, he has Gruul Guildgate. Is it Guildgate?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on what he has to splash, and I do not think we have time to look over these 74 different cards to see which one, but the match is starting, so let's go ahead and take a look. It looks like Eric won the roll, and he started off with Dimir Guildgate, followed by Prophetic Prism. So his mana is completely fixed now thanks to the Prophetic Prism and the Guildgate, along with his other basic lands.
Yeah, that's one of the best turn 2s you can have in this format, because all the decks are at least 3 colors now.
Anthony's deck looking something very akin to what we saw during Gatecrash Limited. He has a lot of aggressive creatures, starting off the game with Daring Skyjack, facing down his opponent's Kingspin Pet.
And I'm looking for rares in Eric Jones' deck list. There aren't too many. Blind Obedience is really the only one I'm seeing here. So Eric's deck really just on the back of the commons and uncommons.
Yep, and Anthony's deck actually has a couple decent ones. Starting off with what looks like is going to be a Boros Reckoner on turn 3. Boros Reckoner, particularly powerful in Standard. I can only imagine how much better it is in Limited.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, Eric's really going to need to just overwhelm him with flyers and extort, or be able to deal with it some way with a removal spell.
Right, Hands of Binding would be great here for Eric.
Yes.
He has one in his deck. He could Devour Flesh the Skyjack to start buying a little time.
Yeah, any of those cards particularly powerful with extort as well, since you get to replay them over and over again. So
right.
All right, here comes a Drakewing Crassus as well as a point from Extort, and as you can see, he's got all his colors, so he's able to play a green-blue spell alongside a black-white one. So
yeah, so the Army of Flyers from Eric Jones, a 2/2 and a 3/1 flyer versus a 3/1 and 3/3 ground pounder from Anthony.
I wouldn't be surprised if he just attacks with both guys here. More than willing to trade his Skyjack.
Wow.
And decides to Trader's Instinct, the Crassus, dealing 11 points of damage, putting Eric all the way to 7.
Yeah, so that's a huge turn 4 for Anthony Kando. Turn 4, 7 life for the opponent.
Yep. And his hand looks like it has some big ones too. Explosive Impact looks like it's on the far right of his hand. Let me make sure. He has 2 of those in his deck. Yeah, so some big cards. As long as he draws a couple lands in the next few turns, going to be able to deal a lot of damage to his opponent. He also has a Scorchwalker in hand, which can equate to a lot of damage as well. Looks like he's threatening a lot of damage right here to Eric Jones, trying to put him to 1. Eric decides to go for as an ultimate price.
Yep.
Ultimate price. So Scorchwalker on Boros Reckoner is 8 damage. Let's see if Devour Flesh. Ooh.
Wow, so big blowouts from Eric Jones.
Right, so Anthony is going to end up gaining 4 life here because the resolution of Scorchwalker happens before the ultimate price, pumping his guy, so should gain 4 life, put him at a reasonably healthy total. Opponent still at 7 with an Explosive Impact in hand, so definitely not safe by any means.
Right, the Flyers crash in, drop Anthony Kando to 11, and Sluisway Scorpion holds the ground and extorts. So 8 to 10.
So Anthony here got pretty blown out last turn by those 2 removal spells. Took all the wind out of his sails. Let's see if he can recuperate. Sluisway Scorpion going to be a great guy to hold off the ground. There is a red card in Anthony's hand that I can't tell what it is. Oh no, it's a Blast of Genius to go along with his Explosive Impact. So if he's able to end of turn Explosive Impact, draw a blue source that comes in play untapped, he could take the game away from Eric. However, I don't think he has very many blue sources in his deck, and his Guildgate does come into play tapped. I think he has a Singleton Island in his deck that he could draw here to just kill Eric on the spot.
So Anthony decides to just take the damage. He's not going to try to kill his creatures. He's just going to go straight to the dome.
Yep. And another creature here from Eric is going to drain Anthony down to 2, put Eric at 9. And even now, though, since Eric goes up to 9, the Explosive Impact, dealing only 5 damage, means that Anthony needs to have a blue source and then a 4-drop card or bigger to discard. or potentially another explosive impact. But Anthony doesn't have it and packs it in.
Yeah, that turn was particularly brutal with the ultimate price into the Devour Flesh, and it was pretty interesting. The Devour Flesh looked like it was still on the stack when the Scorchwalker was blood rushed, when the ultimate price, or when the Devour Flesh was cast.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Eric, it's all about communication. Eric's probably like, all right, that's going to resolve, and then I'll Devour Flesh, just a shortcut. So, I mean, I don't think in that specific situation he would make that very ridiculous mistake.
It doesn't seem like it, but maybe a little bit of poor timing by Anthony. Maybe in response to the ultimate price, you could blood rush the Scorchwalker.
I mean, that's probably what he did, and then Eric was just like, yeah, and that resolves, then this resolves, then Devour Flesh. So, we can't actually hear what they're saying, and as long as they're communicating and they know what's going on, we just have to assume, that's the line of play that happened.
Yep, so these players go into the sideboard. Anthony, I have to imagine Anthony likes his chances with his aggressive Boros deck, splashing blue versus this 4-color deck from Eric Jones.
Yeah, that's actually kind of funny how he's sideboarding right now. There were some cards in his deck that I didn't think were very good, and it looks like Anthony is siding those out. My least favorite of which was the Bellowing Worm, Bellows Lizard.
Wow,
that's the one.
The Bellows Lizard.
Yeah, very aggressive card. Although in this format, like I said, it's not always about playing the cheapest creatures as quickly as possible. A lot of it has to do with cards that have some staying power, and Bellows Lizard was a card that I didn't really like from him, and so he's cutting that along with a few other ones, bringing in some more creatures to hit on curve. Let's see, there was a red one. It was, where's it at? Oh yeah, Viashino Racketeer. A particularly good card in an aggressive red-white deck. Not only can you discard extra lands to it to draw into more gas, it is a 2/1 on curve, and the deck has a lot of 2-drops, but not a whole lot going on between the 2 and 4 slots. So having another 3-drop to hit on curve, maybe fix your hand a little bit. Definitely something to consider.
Yeah, the Racketeer, he doesn't seem too powerful at first blush, but really, after playing with him a little bit, you get to see the true power. You draw him late game, he just says draw a card on it.
Yep.
You draw it early game, it finds you the 4-drop you need, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, and these aggro decks, a lot of times they don't need more than like 4 or 5 mana. Anthony does have a top of a curve with explosive impact, but if he draws a blue spell like the, Blast of Genius, doesn't have a blue source for it, he could just discard that, maybe draw into a different, big spell, pull the game away, so... Here looks like his hand is super mana heavy with Frostburn Weird, and he has a Guild Gate so he can cast then on turn 2 pretty easily, and only one other spell, which...
It must be a pretty good one though, because he kept pretty fast, not much hesitation there.
Yeah. And there's a stigma, a lot of times people don't really like to mulligan, hands that seem mediocre or not quite as good as one they could draw on 6. But in Limited, I think it's particularly important to be familiar with, the fact that, yeah, you can have a bad opening hand sometimes and draw out of it. Like, you can keep a 2-lander a lot of times and just try to draw into land. There are the games where you're going to lose because you get stuck on 2 lands, but you just have to accept that sometimes. But yeah, it looks like Anthony actually didn't side out the Bellows Lizard. He has it in his hand, I do believe, but instead of casting it here, he's just going to pump the Weird 3 times, dealing 4 damage to Eric.
Yeah, kind of interesting. Anthony sided out 3 cards and sided in 3 cards, and Bellows Lizard wasn't one of them, so I can't imagine what he was siding out there.
I mean, it's reasonable considering Eric does have, a lot of expensive creatures, or not expensive, but like, he had a 3-drop 2/2 flyer, which can trade pretty easily with the Bellows Lizard, as well as the Drakewing Crassus. So I can see where he would want that as an aggressive creature that can still trade up later on in the game. Since Eric isn't playing, giant green monsters, it just seems like he's splashing green for a few smaller things like the Drakewing Crassus.
Right. So this turn, Eric has a Gatecreeper Vine. He's still building his mana. He has a lot of mana cards in this deck. He has the Prism, he has the Vine, he has multiple Clue Stones. So he's really trying to go big or go home. He has Horncaller's Chant in the main deck.
That's a pretty sweet one, although it seems unlikely that if Anthony has a good draw, that card's going to, actually be important. Anthony being one of the few decks I've seen that can really be aggressive and put a clock on the opponent, whereas most of the decks in the format are very slow. Looks like he has, looks like a Boros Reckoner in hand, unless that's a different card. Nope, a Boros Reckoner, a Rootborn Defenses, as well as one other card. So likely going to pump once here, after the block to trade off with it, and then play a land and play Boros Reckoner.
Yep, seems like a good turn for Anthony Kando, and this maybe sketchy keep of his is turning out pretty good, as his opponent's not doing anything either.
Right. Actually, the card might not be Bellows Lizard. It might be Trader's Instinct, but it does look like a Bellows Lizard to me.
Yeah, I don't think it's an instinct. Seems so strange that he would keep in the lizard after board.
Sure. There comes the Krull.
Yep. Krull Warrior, and that's not Hands of Binding. That's going to lock down a creature with power 3 or less.
Yeah.
Don't remember the name, but
yeah, that's the new blue enchantment. Yeah, Runner's Bane.
Runner's Bane. Yeah.
It's a very cool card for blue, something that blue doesn't normally have access to, which is a cheap removal spell for cheap creatures. You know, they very often have these dehydration type effects where the creature just doesn't untap, but you know, the Runner's Bane actually tapping the creature with its own ability and then keeping it tapped permanently, you know, until the opponent's able to get rid of it or potentially, you know, play Twiddle.
Right.
But yeah.
And there's the lizard.
Yep, so the Frostburn Weird getting in for some damage, followed up with the Bellows Lizard. Got a lot of pump, guys. It's going to be pretty easy to get through damage here, depending on what he wants to attack with. Eric just having a 2/2. Ooh, and there's a Hands of Binding. That's going to tap down the Lizard for a turn, and then the trigger off of Hands of Binding going to get recast, probably tapping down the Frostburn Weird.
Yeah, so all 3 of Anthony's creatures now tapped down by Eric Jones' blue effects.
Yeah. You know, after next turn, though, he will be only to cast the Hands of Binding once a turn as opposed to twice in the same turn. So the Bellows Lizard more than likely going to get untapped, whereas the Frostburn Weird going to stay tapped. Anthony did top deck an Avenging Arrow, though. This should take care of the Krull quite nicely.
Yeah, Mortis Strider added to the board by Eric Jones. That's a 1/1, and when he dies, he goes back to your hand.
Now, interestingly enough, the Avenging Arrow only does it? No, that's not the one that deals 4 damage. That's the one that destroys a creature that deals damage to you.
Yes.
So if it was, he does have the Boros card from Gatecrash that deals 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. Let me find that one real quick. 1 second. Yeah, he does have Arrows of Justice in his deck, which would be pretty funny against the Krull, since he could pump it before combat up to a 5/5 and then wouldn't be able to kill it. But Mortis Strider, along with Dracewing Crassus from Eric Jones.
He also added a Simic Cluestone to his board. That'll get cracked as soon as possible. It seems like he has plenty of mana this game.
And all his colors too, because he does have all of his basics in play, as well as a Prophetic Prism. So a couple pumps here from Bellows Lizard doing some work.
Oh yeah, getting in for 3.
Yep, and next turn the Weird will untap.
So Eric Jones down to 10 from this motley crew here involving Bellows Lizard.
I don't know any Motley Crue songs, or I would make a good pun.
Yeah, me neither. A little before my time.
Yeah. Anybody? Bueller? All right. All right, tweet at SCG Live if you have a good Motley Crue song you'd like us to make a pun about.
Wow.
All right, so attacking for 3 with the Crassus putting Anthony down to 12 and cracking the Cluestone, like Zach said. Hopefully trying to draw into some more creatures to put into play, both for offensive purposes later as well as defensive purposes against the Frostburn Weird and Bellows Lizard.
So it looks like Dimir Charm is going to take out, is going to try and take him out, but nope.
Yeah, he has the Reborn defenses to protect it. This is, you know, it's not a great use of the card, but it's still good. You know, it's a counter spell. He considers the Frostburn Weird here as his primary source of pressure. And Eric Jones did think it was powerful enough to warrant a removal spell. So both players thinking the Frostburn Weird is important enough. So, you know, we have a block coming here on the Bellows Lizard. This is going to allow him to trade off with the Lizard and still be able to bring it back to his hand after combat. And then perpetually block the Weird as long as Anthony doesn't have a follow-up.
Right, so Anthony, though, trades his Lizard for 4 damage. He pumps his Frostburn Weird to 4/1, Anthony pumps, drops Eric to 6, and we'll see.
I think Anthony actually made a pretty bad mistake here, pumping too much. If he had pumped one less, I believe he had Skymark Rock.
The 3/1 first strike.
Yeah, the 3/1 flying first strike creature from Dragon's Maze.
The Steeple Rock.
Yeah. I believe he has Steeple Rock in hand, and he could have played that had he pumped his creature 1 less. So And again, Anthony also works at Star City Games a lot. Doesn't really play all that much other than the occasional F&M. First tournament series in a while. It's very easy to get blinded by the being able to deal extra damage, doing as much as possible. Kind of forgetting for a moment, since you're enveloped in combat, about the cards that you just drew for the turn. Not necessarily something that should be frowned at or whatever. I know that people make mistakes all the time.
I certainly do.
Yeah, I mean, I make plenty. Don't you worry.
So Frostburn Weird getting in, but it's blocked by the Mortis Strider, and it'll go back to Eric Jones' hand.
Yep, and I believe here he's going to rectify his previous mistake and go ahead and cast his big flyer.
Steeple Rock. Yep. So here it comes, 3/1 flying first strike for 5 mana.
He does have a Trader's Instinct in hand too, so actually threatening lethal. Next turn, taking the Drakewing Crassus.
Right, and even if those creatures aren't in play anymore, he can always take the Sewer Shambler too for 4 points of unblockable
Oh man,
damage.
I do see a split card in Eric Jones's hand. Let's see what that is.
That's a Far and Away.
Oh man, that one's gonna be a blowout. So if he casts Mortis Strider, he's only gonna be able to cast one or the other. But the unsummon effect from it is the only one that's really that important at the moment, since Anthony does have a creature that's tapped down with that blue enchantment, and he is unable to he can just sacrifice that as opposed to one of his relevant creatures.
But yeah, the Far and Away, so long as he keeps 2 mana up, will keep him alive this turn.
It was kind of an odd attack from Eric. I do believe Kando should have probably blocked with the first striker against the 2/1. Maybe he's fearing some sort of combat trick. I'm not quite sure. Downsize would have been a little annoying, although a downsize is going to blow him out in combat here if his opponent had it, so I would assume that he'd want to block.
Yeah, I think mainly he just didn't want to be able to scavenge, or rather give Eric the opportunity to scavenge.
That's also a possibility as well.
I think at 9 life he has to block there. He just has to accept that the scavenge is going to happen, keep his life total as high as possible.
All right, well, he's going for the Trader's Instinct on the Drakewing Crassus, looks like. This far part of Far and Away, I believe, the blue half, is going to act as an unsummon. Not sure if he wants to bounce the 5-drop from Anthony and take 5 damage from his own flyer, or if he wants to just bounce his own creature. I assume that he's just going to bounce Anthony, since Anthony won't be able to replay that creature this turn unless he has a land in hand, which I think he does, or he may have already played a land this turn.
So Eric lets the Trader's Instinct resolve. He'll let Anthony make all his attacks before he decides what to bounce.
Right.
So everyone gets in.
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume he's gonna block the Frostburn Weird and then bounce the rock. Yeah, and he's gonna take 5 as opposed to 3 damage, but he's basically time walking Anthony by forcing him to replay his creature next turn, expending almost all of his mana, and he has 6 power in play to swing back at Anthony. Gonna put Anthony to 1 if he wants to.
Oh,
and
wow,
a massive raid from Anthony seals the deal.
Yeah, so he didn't have a land. He had the massive raid.
Yeah, didn't need it.
So Anthony Kando takes game 2. I was a little surprised. Anytime I see Bell's Lizard cast, I assume that player's going to lose, but hey, he
I've
did
seen
a
that
decent
guy,
amount
dude.
of
I've
damage.
seen that guy do some work. I played him in my very first triple Ravnica or Return to Ravnica draft, and it was a deck with a lot of Deviant Glees and a lot of the not Spectral Flight, but the red one.
Madcap?
Pursuit of Flight. That deck was pretty sweet, and Bella's Lizard did some work, so you keep talking bad about that guy.
Hey, he trades up really well. As long as you have the mana to pump him, he'll trade with any ground pound.
And that's one of the things that aggro decks do later in the game, is when they start to flood out, they don't really have a lot to do with their mana, so both Frostburn Weird and Bella's Lizard give Anthony ways to use that excess mana. As you saw in that game, he had 8 lands in play or more at the end of the game, and was still able to use most of his mana every turn just because he was able to pump either the Frostburn Weird or the Bella's Lizard and still cast his spells. Sometimes even not casting his spells because he pumped. So.
Right. It's really important to have those mana sinks and sealed. I don't care if you're a green deck, a red deck, a Boros deck, whatever. Yep. You have to have something to do with your excess mana because you're going to have it.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe not every game, but some games you're going to get flooded.
So Anthony evens it up at 1-1. Not really too much sideboarding here going on between games 2 and 3, and it's hard to even speculate what they would even be bringing in. other than the few cards that I saw Anthony bring in earlier that we talked about. As far as Eric Jones is concerned, do you see anything in particular you think might be good? Any weird removal spell or creature that wouldn't normally be played that he wants to side in, maybe to help stall Anthony out in the early game?
If I was Eric, I would be going for some defensive creatures. I would be going for creatures with 5 toughness to maybe try and stop that Frostburn weird. Something to stop the initial onslaught. And it's tough. He's playing 4 colors and he has a ton of red fixing, so he could really side in any card in his card pool that he wanted to. The question is just which ones are going to help. Maybe something like a 2/4. Some of the Pillar Field Oxes that are in the format, those could be okay.
Right. So Eric opting to play here, which again we talked about. I think it's actually correct in this matchup since Anthony is such an aggressive deck. However, for the most part, I think you want to be drawing in this format. But leading off with that Viper, getting in a few points of damage in the early game, being a Death Touch blocker later on seems pretty nice as well. Anthony luckily does top deck the white source he was missing, and now his hand is completely unlocked. It's got an Azorius Arrestor, looks like a Keening Apparition, an Avenging Arrow, as well as something else that I can't see. I don't know. These people, and they're flicking their cards. Alright, draws another land, not necessarily what he wants, but now isn't going to have trouble casting any of his spells.
Yep, the Beetle comes down for Eric Jones, the Beetle form Mage. This is a 2/2, has a Frilled Oculus-like ability. It can pump itself for a few extra
Let's
mana.
be real, it's a Root Wall ability.
A Root Wall ability. Let's go all the way back to Tempest, Root Walla.
Yeah. Dude, that card was reprinted so many times in various core sets. And there was Basking Root Walla, and then there was just regular Root Walla, and they keep making these cards that look like Root Walla, but they don't really look like it. I mean, look at that guy.
He's made out of a beetle. I don't even understand. How does that work?
He gets flying, though, so that's what it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you put a little mana into it, get some battles in there.
Right, definitely a lot better than Frilled Oculus.
Yeah, Beetle Form Mage is actually one of the more impressive cards at common in this format that I've seen. Being able to be a 4/4 flyer, it only costs 2 mana to activate him. I think even at 3 mana to activate him, it would have been good enough to play. It is a little bit better because you're able to still cast a 2-drop in the same turn on turn 4 while attacking for 4.
Right.
I think it looks like Anthony cited Furious Resistance. I think that was the card in his hand. It's not really something that I would expect him to bring in this matchup, simply because it's a very defensive card, and I feel like he is the aggressive deck here. He does have a pair of them in his sideboard. Maybe he thought that since Eric, had some smaller creatures that couldn't withstand the big first striking effect, maybe he wanted those. If he hasn't seen too much from Eric's deck in general, other than some removal spells and whatnot. So.
Wow, so Azorius Arrestor gets killed by ultimate price. Eric Jones knows what happened last game. He knows Anthony's deck is super aggressive. Decides to just take it out right now.
Yep. And, not like a bad plan, since Anthony didn't really play anything on his turn 4. I guess trying to Avenging Arrow, which is what he's going to do after taking the 4 damage from the Beetle Form Mage.
So we have a 1/2 Death Touch facing off against a 1/4 Frostburn Weird.
Yep, and that looks like Anthony drew a War Leader's Helix, which would be able to take care of the Viper if he really wants it to. I don't think he wants to cast it now. He wants to put a little more pressure on the board. Probably going to play that Keening Apparition. He might end up using the Helix next turn should Eric fail to produce another threat, and this will allow him to attack without fear of losing either of his creatures to the Viper.
Right, for a decent chunk of damage, that would be 5 damage if that's what goes down, but Eric Jones still has 3 cards in hand, and looks like one of them's the Scorpion.
Alright, so a couple of Death Touch guys in play, looking real bad for Anthony. He has a couple of draws in his deck, big flyers and whatnot that he could play, but it looks like he just drew another land.
Yeah, the longer this game goes on, the more Eric Jones is favored. He has the Horncaller's Chance, he has the big 6 drops,
yep. Where
Anthony really just has the explosive impacts.
Yep, and so he is, drawn 7 lands here, only about 5 or 6 spells. That really shows, the disparity in between aggro and control, whereas Eric would love to draw 6 or 7 lands, whereas Anthony hates drawing 6 or 7 lands.
Yeah.
Once he gets to 6, that's the top end, he doesn't need to draw any more after that, and he's got all these, he has a few 6 drops in his deck with the explosive impacts. Not a whole lot else to do with the mana. The Frostburn Weird being locked down completely by all 3 of the creatures now from Eric Jones, with that Mortis Strider coming into play.
Yeah, and it seems like Anthony doesn't really even have any extort cards to make use of those lands either.
Yeah. So kind of just floundering here. Eric Jones in complete control. Anthony could just play a flare though and start swinging over that, but Eric does have a lot of removal in his deck and could have an answer for it even then. Looks like Anthony drew a white card, flipping past it very quickly. I think I know what it is, but let me double check his deck list. I think it's the Hazda Snare Squad.
Okay.
Although it could be the +1/+1 flying first strike card from. I can't see it.
So Anthony, thinking about this here, he's trying to decide how to best get through these creatures. He could play both his spells if he wanted to. He could take out one of Eric's Death Touchers, and he could give that flying, but I'm not sure what that accomplishes, really.
Yeah, I believe, I think that is aerial maneuver. That picture does look like that, I believe. So that is the +1/+1 flying and first strike. Actually pretty good against Death Touch. However, if Eric had any sort of removal spell in response, it was going to be very awkward for Anthony, and very similar to what happened in the previous game, where he got destroyed by a double removal spell with a Scorchwalker in game 1. A similar thing could have happened.
Right, so Horncaller's Chant from Eric Jones. He's on 8 mana. He decides to put 2 4/4 Rhinos into play.
Yeah, I mean, he could have populated a different kind of token should he had one in play, but I don't think there are very many bigger tokens in this format. Maybe an Ooze token, if you can slime molding for gigantic.
Right, I've populated 1/1 flyers when you really need a flyer, but right now these 4/4s are going to do some work.
And as you can see, this Racketeer, Anthony looking quite foolish for not holding on to a land, since his deck doesn't really need that many. So now he's discarding his Furious Resistance, which is equally bad as a land at this point, since it's not very good. He could use it to try to trade for a 4/4 Trampling Rhino. Maybe, and if he had been able to discard a land instead, he'd been holding onto that Furious Resistance should Eric decide to just crash in here with his Rhinos.
Right.
Because Crasher Rhinos, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
8/4 Mirage Trampler. I know my cards.
That's true. You especially know the old ones because you're old.
Oh.
But I'm older than you, I think, so that's fine.
So Hands of Binding going on one of the Rhinos here for Eric.
Yeah. So what Anthony can do, though, now he has this War Leader's Helix. He can kill the creature with the Hands of Binding on it. And he can also give one of his creatures first strike and block the Scorpion, which is also fine. So a lot of options here for Anthony. I think he might be kicking himself now that he got rid of that Furious Resistance, which could have easily killed the Rhino for just a single mana, should Eric not have a removal spell.
Yeah, and I think he really does have to pull the trigger on this Daring Leap right here. Eric Jones still at 14 life. He's not going to win by burning him out.
Yep. So what he can do with the white card, you just said.
Daring Leap.
Yeah, what he can do with Daring Leap is pump the Frostburn Weird to a 3 power and then give it first strike itself. Yeah. So I just got pun mastered by Zach Hall on this piece of paper. So what Anthony can do, because that's his last name, and I didn't even catch that. Now I just want to jump off a bridge.
That's what these dirty looks have been for. Haven't you been catching them?
No, I wasn't.
All right, so
I'm just supposed to know when you give me a dirty look. Is that supposed to for?
All right, so.
All right, so we trade off Sluiceway Scorpion. We have the ability to scavenge now, but we definitely wanted to get rid of that Hands of Binding, which we did. It's kind of interesting that he tapped the Racketeer as opposed to the Frostburn Weird, though.
Yes, it's a little odd. I'm wondering why he did that, but it looks like Scavenge comes down and the other Rhino makes it a 6/6. Right now, 6/6 Rhino, 1/2 Death Touch, 1/1 Strider.
And he drew the other Furious Resistance he sided in. So a little bit of justice here for Anthony Kando. He can pump his Weird up to a 3 power, give it a +3/+0 first strike, and it looks like Eric doesn't have a removal spell because he would use it last turn once Anthony went for the aerial maneuver. So this is quite funny. So Furious Resistance, not exactly the best card, especially in an aggressive deck, but really gonna put the needle here to Eric in his 6/6.
Yeah, that's exactly what he needs right now.
No, Anthony, don't do it. Furious Resistance, come on, buddy. Oh man, don't do it, man. It has trample. Don't just jump block. All right, take a moment.
Here
Breathe.
we go. Here we go.
Breathe.
Here it comes.
There we go.
Setting up the mana.
Well, white can't pump him, so we'll see. I guess he's setting aside War Leader's Helix mana, but 6/6, man. Maybe he's thinking he needs to War Leader's Helix. Maybe that's not even Furious Resistance. I don't know. Oh, it's a massive red.
Okay.
No wonder.
Makes
just
a little more sense now.
Oh, man.
Wow,
I really wish that was Furious Resistance, though. That would have been so sweet.
But Anthony Kando has to 2-for-1 himself to take out the 6/6, but right now the board's at parity. All Eric has is a Gate Creeper Vine.
No, that's the Viper. Now he has a Gate Creeper.
Right.
Gate Vine Creeper, yeah. So he's got a Mortar Strider, a Viper, and a Gate Vine Creeper facing down, a pair of creatures from Anthony's side. I don't think either player really has too much going on in hand, so...
Now, right now we're playing Draw Go here. Eric Jones, a little bit of an advantage. I think he's thinned more land out of his deck.
Not to mention he can actually do more stuff with those lands, whereas Anthony is, has way more 2-mana 2/2s and 2-mana 3/1s and things like that to draw, which don't match up well against Mortar Strider or Viper.
No, and Anthony can't do much right now because all he has is lands.
Can't he?
He cannot.
All right, so 2 more lands from Anthony in hand, so definitely just getting massively flooded.
And really, Eric can attack with this Sewer Shambler if he wants to. Oh,
Yep.
there's a game changer right here. This is effectively 5/5.
Right, but I don't think that... oh, that was a good top deck with the Boros Reckoner, but I don't think that trading off the 2/1 is worth just like being able to scavenge onto something, since none of your creatures in play really match up well against a Frostburn Weird when attacking. I mean, you could pump up the Viper, but you're wanting to use that to trade off with one of Anthony's better creatures later. While it can attack, I don't think that trade-off would be necessary.
Right, especially not when you draw the 2/2, the
right.
Kroll Warrior.
Yeah, so now he's got Kroll Warrior, which can battle in against a Boros Reckoner and kill it, while Anthony only is able to deal 5 damage to a target. He's not going to 2-for-1 Eric very easily with it. But now, I believe that's a black-green creature from Eric Jones. Let's take a look at his deck list. It's a 5-drop. These pictures, man. I think that's remove a counter from a creature you control. Target creature gets -1/-1.
It's a sideboard card if it is. It's not in the main deck.
Maybe some sort of... I think it's some sort of Gorgon. I think it's Corrose the Gorgon.
Yeah, not in the main deck. This is a side-in for Eric Jones. He decided that this would help him against Anthony's aggressive deck. So he's coming in, the 2/5 Gorgon. And we have an Eyes in the Sky. So
yeah, it does have Death Touch, which is pretty important to note, and that's why he is just able to attack with it pretty freely. But the Eyes in the Sky is able to put a little pressure into the air for Anthony. He's going to start attacking for 2. He could trade off his Boros Reckoner with the Gorgon, since Gorgon can do some work later on with Scavenge. If he's willing to, trade off his Sewer Shambler in combat, he can put 2 counters on a creature, then remove both of those to kill both of the bird tokens, or, the Racketeer and a bird token, or some combination thereof.
Right. If it wasn't right to attack with the Sewer Shambler before, I think it is now, just because of that Gorgon.
Well, perhaps not now that the Boros Reckoner is in play, since you do get to kill 2 creatures without even losing your Boros Reckoner, unless you want to scavenge and then use the Gorgon itself. But here, I think Anthony definitely wants to block the Kroll. If he pumps it, he just wants to deal 5 to the Gorgon. It's possible he could double block the Kroll with the Boros Reckoner and something else, but I think he just opts to take the damage.
Wow, okay, so takes it, goes down to 3.
Yep, so many creatures on the board, we can't even tell what was just played on Eric Jones' side.
Yeah, we'll get him to resize those for you. Maybe move the Gate Creeper Vine over to off screen. Get this relevant creature on screen.
Yeah, not entirely relevant. Hopefully, it was a 5-drop though. It might be Golgari Longlegs. It does look like a multicolored creature.
Yeah, I think it is. I see the hybrid mana symbols up there. I'm gonna say Longlegs added to the board. 5/4.
Yep. So big guy. Looks like Anthony's in a really tough spot here. Like, he can attack. He has the Scorchwalker to deal a couple extra points of damage with the Flyers, but those 2 lands in hand, not really doing a whole lot for him.
So the 2 Flyers coming in for Anthony. The Scorchwalker gives him a little hope. He's thinking maybe if he draws an Explosive Impact, he can do the last few points.
Yep, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he just Scorch Walkered here, since I think Explosive Impact is one of the only ways he can win. He would deal 7 here to Eric, put him to 7 life, and then next turn attack for an additional 2 points of damage down to 5,
Wow.
and then ultimately killing him with an Explosive Impact off the top.
Yeah, I
Instead,
don't know
though,
if I like that.
it looks like he just cast the Scorchwalker, looking to trade here with the Golgari Longlegs, but I don't think that he's going to be able to win with that play.
No.
He can trade off now with the Gorgon if he wants. He can trade off with the Longlegs, but he's not in a great spot.
Yeah, I really don't like that play because he still has 2 explosive impacts left in his deck and only about 20 cards left, so about 1 in 10 chance of drawing.
Well, by playing that, he does give himself a few more turns, though, since he can just start trading off. So maybe if he does the trade off here with the Scorchwalker, it buys himself a few more turns. His opponent now attacking with the Viper, which don't think is correct since he can just get first strike on the Boros Reckoner.
And then redirect that death-touching damage to anything he wants to,
yeah.
right?
Or if he decides to... No. So if he first strikes, then...
right.
Yeah, and it's also not a redirect of damage. It's just however much damage Boros Reckoner takes, that's how much damage a target takes, and it's not the same source. So he can either first strike the Viper, or take one, from the Viper, killing it, and with the Reckoner redirecting a point to something like the Sewer Shambler. But I think he is just probably going to first strike the Viper, and then probably put the Weird in front of the Sewer Shambler, because he can't really afford to take a whole lot of damage here.
No, he's at 6 life. Not too much, and I'm looking for any kind of Blood Rush cards in Eric Jones's deck, and I don't see them.
Oh, looks like he took damage here.
Wow.
I mean, he took 3 down to 3. Maybe he just doesn't want to give Eric any sort of way to, interact with his creatures. Like if he blocks with something, it could be problematic. I don't think it was right not to block with the Reckoner and give it a first strike. But again, another card that Anthony probably hasn't played all that much with. Since he doesn't really play all that much constructed.
Right.
He could have just forgotten the secondary ability on Boros Reckoner where you can give it first strike, just afraid of the death touch from the Viper.
So Anthony turns all his creatures sideways here. I'm not sure what he drew, but I thought it was a white card. Maybe a Rootborn Defenses, something like that.
Well, even with the Rootborn Defenses, he's dead on the swing back. I'm not entirely sure what his plan is here. He might just be under the assumption that he's mostly dead and just, hoping that a Hail Mary his opponent decides not to block or decides not to block enough. Maybe even drew Explosive Impact and he's just trying to get in 7 damage. But
right.
I think he's okay here, taking 5, and then the Explosive Impact not going to have a lethal effect.
Anthony Kando really flooded out this game. He needed an Explosive Impact. All these lands really hurting him here.
Yeah. So looks like we're gonna try to play around some stuff. I'm not exactly sure what Eric Jones is trying to play around with the block on the Scorchwalker. It's not like Gorkline Rampager can come out of Anthony's hand. I'm not sure if there's a red card only that gives his creature trample.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of one, but there could easily be an uncommon or something that does from Dragon's Maze.
Well, I'm not sure. If you guys can think of one, feel free to tweet it at us at SCG Live. There are so many cards in this format, and since it is a new format, there are a lot of uncommons and rares that neither me nor Zach has played with, and we try to stay on top of things. But off the top of my head, I honestly can't think of it. And I even have Anthony's list here in front of me, but it could be a sideboard card. So
yeah, really, what this looks like.
Yeah, but so Wrecking Org can give double strike, but there's no reason to double block a Scorchwalker, I don't think. So that was the only thing I was trying to figure out. He's going to lose both of his guys here, but I don't know if that matters all that much.
Yeah, I think Anthony is just dead on the swing back, and Eric Jones is still going to be alive here. Rootborn Defenses, I think, was the card. I think he said populate a bird token.
Okay, so yeah, he doesn't lose any creatures in combat and has a blocker. But it looks like he just has a couple lands to follow up in his hand, and there's way too much power on the other side of the board for Anthony to not die here. Maybe if Anthony had made a few different blocks earlier in the game, saved some of those life points, this wouldn't have been a futile Alpha Strike, but now he's just facing off lethal without dealing his opponent much damage at all.
Yeah, and all you can say is go. Hope to represent some kind of fog effect, but I don't think Eric Jones is going to buy it. I think he's going to attack.
Yeah, I mean, it seems likely he will attack with 2 creatures that are big enough to kill him. I mean, even if all he attacks with is the Kroll and the Long Legs, he can, you know, present lethal. Wait, it wasn't. No. It was not. It wasn't Reborn Defenses. He's at 7 life.
He did populate. What was it? It cost 4 mana.
Yeah,
and
he
got to
just put it
populate.
off screen into his graveyard. We can't actually see it. I just assumed he was dead. I can't see anything.
Well, he is dead.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I am very curious now, at least. But, yeah, so Eric Jones takes it in 3 games. Anthony Kendo, I think, could have played a couple situations a little bit better. You know, combat can get very gummed up in a lot of these